this is the session, kind of path, the chapters that we're going to go through looking at this topic of major donors over the next few minutes. So we're going to start at the very beginning. We're going to be talking about what major donors actually are. Then we're going to go and think, right, well, we know what they are now. Where do we go and see if we can find some? Where do we go fishing, in other words? But then with major donors, it gets a bit more complicated than just finding these people and asking them for loads and loads of money. There's a bit more to it, and the end of the session, we'll have a look at what really makes major donors potentially stand out from other forms of fundraising, in a kind of strategic sense. So, why don't we kick off and see if we can define major donors? Now, there's a bit of a misconception or a misunderstanding about what major donors are. You see, for small organizations, for local organizations like you, major donors don't need to be millionaires. They don't need to wear Rolexes or drive Bentleys. Though, to be honest, any discerning millionaire wouldn't wear a Rolex and they wouldn't drive a Bentley because they're a bit run of the mill nowadays. Anyway, what major donors need to be for you is just somebody who can make a significant financial contribution to your organization, which you might have guessed because it's written here on the slide. But there are two italicized words here that we need to have a little think about. The first one is the term or the word individual. Sometimes major donors are not individuals. Sometimes, in fact, quite often, they can come as couples. I've come across couples where one partner is concentrating on the accumulation of wealth in that partnership, and the other one, well, it's their job to spend it. Others both work, both bring in wages, both own businesses potentially. And so they like to give, but they give jointly because it's an expression of their partnership. So usually, and for today, we're thinking about an individual, but sometimes they come in pairs. But the more important bit of this statement to dive into is that word significant. What the heck does that word significant actually mean? And it really does help actually in the context of your organization to define what that term significant is. And we want to define it by putting a pound sign next to it. What's a significant gift for you? Well, if you're the NSPCC, a significant gift is £100,000. So if you were to give the NSPCC £90,000, you still do not classify it as a major donor with the NSPCC. I do a bit of work with Battersea Cat and Dogs Home as another big global charity, but their definition of significant, so a major donor gift, is £10,000 in a calendar year. It might be for you a gift of £5,000 would qualify as a significant gift. It might be that a gift of £2,500 or maybe even £500 qualifies as a major gift, a significant gift for you. At the end of this bit, you'll have a bit of a better idea of where to start in figuring this out, figuring out what that idea of significant is for you. But you might already have a bit of a gut feeling of what a big gift would be like in your organization, one that causes you to stand up and do a little dance, maybe, once you get the email saying it's coming in. So we're looking for a significant financial gift. And this is where major donors fundraising starts becoming different from other areas of fundraising. That gift warrants or deserves a one-to-one relationship with your organization. So in other words, they can pick up the phone and call you. because they know your name, not your organization name. They're not going to pick up the phone and talk to the director of Whatnot and Doodah. They're going to pick up the phone and talk to Amber, or they're going to talk to Cherish. They've got a one-to-one relationship. And we'll dig into that a bit more as well as we go through the session. So who are they? Who are these major donors? Well, the thing is, we can never be sure, but we can do a little exercise to give us a little bit of guidance in this. So let's just imagine now that we are all together and we're working for a charity that's got a total income of £100,000 a year. So it might be a bit bigger than you. I don't know, it might be a bit smaller than, but it's definitely still a small charity. What we're going to do is we're going to set our major donor gift threshold at £2,500. So if anybody gives us a gift of £2,500 or more in a calendar year, they qualify for us as a major donor. Now, the average wage in the UK for those in their 50s is around £35,000-ish at the moment. Once upon a time, I earned that massive amount of money. And I could easily give out of my pay packet at that time £100 a month. And I didn't really notice it as much of a drain on my lifestyle. So that comes to about £1,200 a year. So as an average earner, I'm not going to meet that major donor threshold. But my partner was a teacher earning about the same, about the national average wage teachers get. And when you combined our two incomes together, we could just about make that £2,500 major donor mark together. Bit of gift aid on top of that, maybe we would maybe get over it. But the question is, what if she got a promotion? She's not a head teacher, but head teachers across the UK start from a pay salary of about £55,000 and go up to a salary of £120,000, 4 times pretty much the national average. Chartered accountants, they average about 90 grand a year. Engineers, lawyers, they're similar. Maybe engineers are a tad lower. GPs, their average pay is about 90 grand a year. Easily that can go north of 120 grand, especially if they're on the fringes of London and they're getting that London waiting as well for their salaries. Now, all of those kind of professional roles on their own could easily give 2.5 grand a year, we would assume. Not to mention as well, if they've got a partner who shares the bills or a flatmate that they live with who shares the bills. Maybe they still live at home with mum and dad, which is a very common thing that's happening, isn't it? That's also not to mention the fact that folks like that tend to have other income from dividends, from bonuses through work, potentially. Maybe they've got a flat that they rent out as well to supplement their income. All I'm saying with this really, sorry, I should have flashed that up. There we go. All I'm saying with this really is that when we're thinking about major donors in the small charity world, we can think of millionaires, but actually it's probably much more likely that we want to be thinking about professionals in their own right, professionals, couples. And maybe that's the largest takeaway that you need from today, and we're hitting it really early, aren't we? These professionals can give significant gifts to your organizations. But if they're going to be doing that, we need to be building up relationships with them. We need to be giving them the reason and the excuse that they need to make a gift like that. We've also got a bit of a superpower. If somebody was to make a gift of £2,500 to a big charity, that big charity is not going to blink. It's just going to take it as though it's 20p. For us, they give us a gift of £2,500. We're potentially opening that bottle of Prosecco we've got in the fridge at night because that's a massive win for us. And so what we can do is these people who ordinarily would not be treated specially at all by a charity, we're able to go in and give them the worth that they are due. It's all part of the richness and excitingness. It's not a word, it is now, of major donor fundraising. So we can compete with the big charities here as well. Now, I once worked in a bank many moons ago in quite an affluent suburb, and I have never encountered so much debt. I worked in disadvantaged areas, I worked in villages. The affluent area, folks were just crawling in debt. You know, the Mercedes that they had was on finance, or it was a company car. The holidays went on credit cards. The designer dogs were from puppy farms. Their artwork and their jewelry were financed by extending mortgages until they were nearly ready to snap. We can't assume that because somebody is a doctor that they've got lots of money. We can't assume because a couple are together and they're both head teachers of different schools that they've got money to give us. And also, we need to just hold in tension the idea that we don't know what huge vet bills are maybe awaiting them, or what child support payments they're having to make, what essential repairs they're having to do to their old Victorian villas that they live in. We don't know people's financial circumstances. And it's important that we kind of balance the whole idea of, well, they do that for a living or they own that business, so they must be minted. We want to be aware of that, but we also want to be aware that, hang on a minute, we don't know for certain. And so we need to be sensitive with what we're doing. When we're looking for major donors, we're looking for these ideas of indicators of wealth. Of course we are. But sometimes the opposite is true. People who have no indicators of wealth actually are able to be major donors. And the reason I say that is because I've seen it a few times. Once, kind of most starkly, there was a lady who lived in a small miner's cottage. You know, there's this little bungalow with like 3 rooms downstairs, and that's you, kind of like a thatched roof kind of thing. If it had been down south, it would have had a thatched roof, but had a slate roof up here in Scotland. So it's a small miner's cottage in the Highlands, in just a little unassuming village. And the charity that I was working with, she had supported them for a long time, and it was always to the tune of about £500 a year is what it would add up to, and she would give by check. And so she was kind of under the radar of our major donor thoughts as the charity because she wasn't giving that much. She lived in not a particularly affluent postcode. There wasn't those hallmarks that were around there. But then, without any intentional effort on our part, she just decided one day to make a gift of £7,000 to that charity and sent in a letter and a check through the post. And it landed out of the blue. Sometimes those things happen, which is wonderful. And it turns out that she lived very simply because that was just the way that she had been brought up, and that was the way that she lived. She had a very full bank account and a very full heart, and it was coming as she was approaching retirement for her to start spending out her fortune. And what we did, I worked with this charity for a couple of years in fundraising, and over that time that relationship was cultivated, and she was talked to, and she was asked her opinions, things that we're going to talk about later on, and she ended up leaving a gift of £25,000 to the charity, or making a gift of £25,000. Not bad for the price of a few cups of coffee and a few slices of cake. So we can't assume things, but we also kind of need to if we're going to go and explore this world. But really what we're looking for, we're looking for people who do have disposable income, or who we are safe to assume should have disposable income. We're also looking for people who are connected to your cause. Maybe that should go without saying, but we're looking for people who are going to care about what you do, or maybe they care about what you do already. They also need to be a bit of a proactive, flavor about them. There's that we said on the slide here, a desire to get involved. Something, they've got that inner compulsion to make the world a better place. And you maybe see that expressed through the way they live their lives, even how much they tip at a restaurant potentially. And also, a common trait of a major donor is that they have the ability to open doors to other major donors. You treat Sally well, she's talking to the folks at work who are getting paid the same amount of money about how amazing this charity is. And guess what? They maybe want to explore a charity as well. But we are getting ahead of ourselves there a little bit. So, major donors, we're not necessarily just looking for millionaires to make £100,000 gifts. We're more likely going to be looking at people of a professional level, maybe small business owners who we can go and ask to make gifts that are significant maybe for them because they've not made a gift of that size before, and significant for us as an organization because it's going to mean we can make a difference. Hopefully that makes sense as a definition of what we're talking about with major donors. Now, the first thing we want to do is start connecting with people. And we do that really by trying to pull together what we call a cultivation list. Because what we're doing is we're cultivating, growing, bringing on relationships. So let's think about this, building this whole idea of a cultivation list. So what we have, the names that we have on this cultivation list, which is like step one really of your strategy in major donors, is we want this to be a list of prospective donors, potential donors, because it helps us bring together a list of people just so we can see what opportunities are potentially out there for us to explore, what relationships are out there for us to explore. So get together with some of the other folks involved in your organization. Who do you know who could maybe fall into the bracket of major donors that we've just talked about? Have a little chat, have a little brainstorming session, and jot down some names. Now, if you find this process or this step maybe quite straightforward, maybe you're connected, or your partner's connected, or your trustees are connected, for example, then it's probably a good sign that major donor fundraising is going to be a bit of maybe a winner for you. But if you find this really tricky, it's maybe a sign that maybe there's something else you can go and explore instead. I'm working with a charity at the moment in Grimsby, and Grimsby is a really quite disadvantaged part of the UK. And there's not very many big houses in Grimsby, we can say. But the charity has a very good proposition for being a major donor, supported charity. And it's taken 6 months of researching and talking and networking to get to the point where now we can see that there's actually a path through. Now, that charity is in a lovely position because it's had that 6 months to be able to invest into building up and exploring these relationships. But not all charities are like that. And maybe you're not like that. But if you find it easier to bring in these different names on the paper and build up maybe 10, 15, maybe even 20 names on this piece of paper, on this cultivation list, and you can start filling in a bit of information about them as well, then you're probably in a good place for it. So as you can see here, what you want to find out as a very bare minimum is, well, you definitely need the person's name. And if they've got a partner, you need to know that as well. How much they can give, that's a complete guess. But it's good to figure out the people who can maybe give 5,000 to the people who can maybe give you 30 or 40,000 pounds. It's good to have that kind of in your mind, but we won't put too much stock in that. It's really important to understand how they're connected to the cause. If they're connected already, you've got a head start. If they're not connected, what kind of path could you potentially plot to connect them to your cause? That's the long game. That's hard. We want to be starting with people who are already connected because they're more likely to say yes. And of course, the connected person. Now, the connected person, I'm slightly getting ahead of myself here, but the connected person might be the person in your organization who knows that potential major donor. Maybe it's their brother-in-law or sister-in-law. Maybe it's their hairdresser. Who knows? But there's a connection there. Now, it might also be that there's not a connection, but there's a maybe like a one-step remove thing where, you know, Jane, who is our board member, is their next door neighbor. That's kind of a step to get to that person. And that can be okay as well. But there should really be a connection if they're going to make your shortlist, first of all. As time goes on, those connections, you exhaust them and you need to find new ones. That's part and parcel of the game, but we won't worry about that just now. What this does as well as you're bringing in this kind of list, it also allows people to put in a veto and say, no, that's not that. Just we won't go there. We won't do that. And you don't necessarily need to explain that because we don't need to go into maybe the insights of people's finances or their current state of life. It's not necessary. But when you're all together, pulling this together, making sure that people understand there is a veto that doesn't need to be explained, it can help the process bob along a bit more. Now, when we look at reality and what happens with charities, with smaller charities who do major donors, this very much is the reality of where these people come from. They are either staff, volunteers, trustees, existing donors, or actually they could be your service users. That might be a problem. After that being the most common group of major donors, it goes out to, as you can see here, their friends and families. Then it can zoom out a bit more, but this is where it gets a bit tenuous when you're going out to your professional networks or your acquaintances, like friends of friends, for example, who you kind of know. Typically, it tends to be trustees, existing donors, and the friends and family of service users and staff. That tends to be where the first major donor conversations come from. And actually, you might find enough there to keep you going for a good number of years, which is quite a surprising statement to be saying. That's not a bad thing. It's a scary thing, potentially, but it's not a bad thing because all of these people already will know about what you do, which means you don't need to put in as much time and effort on average to bring them to a place where they're going to be willing to make a gift. It's working smart. It's working easier, but sometimes talking to trustees potentially about a big major gift, that can be a bit scary. And that's the downside of major donor fundraising. It involves eyeballing people and asking them for money. So cultivation list. That's where we need to go to start it. Well, that's not entirely true, is it? Because what we did first of all is we set that financial threshold. What is the size of gift that we're going to say is a minimum of a major donor gift? Then we're going to go think about who's in our network, who do we know who could potentially be major donors, putting them down on a cultivation list with a few basic bits of information that we've been able to find out about them. If you have 20 names on that list, you've got plenty. I was working with a medium-sized charity. We had 50 names on the list, of which we talked to 5 in 1 year. Because of that one-to-one relationship, these take a bit of work. So you don't need big numbers to make a big difference. What would you do with three £5,000 gifts? 15 grand. Yes, please. I'll be taking that and I'll be dancing all the way home. Just from 3 conversations. Well, 3 repeat conversations. Because it's all based on relationships. So let's go and move on to our next chapter now, where we think about planning out the relationship. Now, you might think that the person who is connected to that potential major donor is going to be the best person to bring through this relationship. And the answer is they might be, but you need to be careful, because most of the time they're actually not. Typically what happens is that there's going to be that person, that person in your organization who knows that donor better than other folks. And on our slide here, that person's called the charity link. They're linking the potential donor to the charity. But what we want to do is we want to ensure that kind of personal relationships are preserved in our major donor work. And so what's usually wiser as we're chasing these significant gifts is to bring somebody else in to do the major donor kind of professional relationship building with the potential donor instead of that charity link person. Because if that potential donor says no, or that potential donor gets embarrassed because actually they don't have any money because they're living in their credit card debt, then we don't want that personal relationship to be affected by it. We're protecting ourselves and our people by doing that. But what that charity link person does is they introduce the potential donor to the charity representative. And that's going to be somebody who has an important title in your organization. A title like a founder, a title like a trustee, a title like a director or a CEO. Those typically are the caliber of people in an organization who need to be doing this kind of fundraising, which means if you are a lowly fundraiser, it's brilliant because you get to tell the bosses exactly what they need to do. And they go and do all the hard work and you don't have to, where it's usually the other way around. But it's the peer-to-peer fundraising that we're doing. So we want folks who are higher up with those kind of, sexier job titles to be doing this. It just resonates better with the potential donor. Typically, it does. And so the charity link person introduces their friends, the potential donor, to the charity representative. And then what they do is the charity link person then steps away from that relationship. And it's up to the charity representative and the potential donor to work on that relationship and build it up over time. And so that charity link person steps away and is just pals with that potential donor again, or they're just a family member of that potential donor again. They're no longer invested or asking about the progress of things. The relationship is now separate. But that charity link person knows the potential donor. They know what they like to eat. They know where they went on holiday. They know about their family. And the charity representative maybe doesn't. And so what we need to do is we need to have this kind of air of a little research phase to our project. Because we want to make sure that the donor, if they do give, actually, even if they don't give, we need to make sure that they feel valued. And the only way we can do that is by bringing over knowledge. And what we're looking for is any knowledge and information that we can get about this potential donor that's going to help us do what the Chartered Institute of Fundraising have said, which we've got on this slide. We're aiming to find the information that allows the right prospect, so the right potential donor, to be asked for the right gift by the right person at the right time and in the right way. If you get all of those aligned, you're not guaranteed of a gift, but you're in a very strong place to be getting one. What this is going to do, and actually keeping this really lovely little kind of statement in mind, is it helps us not chase dead ends and avoid wasting time on looking at going for the wrong prospects. It hopefully will help us avoid being fruitless in our efforts as well. So, what are we aiming for? So, what we want information that's going to allow us to do this right prospect, right gift, right person, right time, right way, don't we? And in very practical terms, what you'll be wanting to do here likely is to create what's called a crib sheet. And if you want one, I've got one that I can send over to you, which you can just use as a template. Just email me, david@triceratopstraining.co.uk, and I'll happily send you over the Triceratops training template that we've got for this. But what this crib sheet does is it helps to capture all of the information about this person that we need to see if they're going to be worth building a relationship with, and then keep track of the information we need as we're building that relationship. Now, some of you might not need that. Now, a friend of mine's a head teacher, and he's got 500 kids in his school, and he knows all of their names. Another friend of mine has got this really uncanny ability to remember exactly what's going on in your life. It's quite a superpower, actually, the way that he does it. But then other people are like me and they struggle to remember their own names at the best of times. And actually having this crib sheet to make sure everything's written down is really useful, especially if you're starting to manage 3, 4, 5, potentially even 6 of these relationships moving forward. And a crib sheet basically just looks a bit like this. Lots of different aspects you might want to include, but myself, I break it down into these 5 different areas. Professional information. Who do they work for? Or what company or companies do they own? What kind of business is it? What do they do? What's their position? As you can see here, are they in any memberships? Have they got any qualifications backing them up? Are they involved in any networks? Professional information. Family and friends as well. One of the one of the simplest top tips when it comes to major donors is see if they've got a pet. Learn the pet's name. You can learn the name of children as well, but people are more precious about their pets usually. But understanding, what their families are, what their friends' name are, you can stalk on Facebook to do this. It's really quite fun. I mean, invasive, and that helps you to present yourself as a person. Oh, I saw you had a couple of kids as I was looking at your profile on Facebook. Tell me about your kids. It helps build that relationship. It opens up conversation. Have a look, see if they've been in the media. Have they been awarded something for triumphs? Is there any bad stuff in the media that you want to steer clear of? It's important to know that as well. Their education. Maybe they went to the same university as somebody that you knew. Maybe they studied a similar course to somebody else that you know, so that you're reaching and looking for potential areas of connection. And also, you don't have to do major donors over a business meeting. You don't have to do it in an office. You can go and grab a coffee and cake with someone. I played badminton, and I was playing badminton with a potential major donor at one point. In fact, I was last night as well, actually, but I've not got a charity lined up for them just yet. But finding out about what they're interested in, and actually, when we're building up this relationship, building up an actual proper human relationship, not just a fundraising relationship, is going to work wonders for you. Be genuinely interested in what they're going on, genuinely interested in the way they perceive the world and how they think the world works, and then gently educate them as well that actually, no, you're right, and they should give you loads of money. We don't do that straight away. Don't worry. A crib sheet is a very strange and alien device to build up genuine human interactions. But if you're managing lots of these, it's essential actually, and it's essential to keep it updated with progress of how this relationship is building, because you'll get to a point eventually when you think, right, now is the time to ask. And how are you going to find this information? Well, talk to the person who's connecting them into the charity. They're going to be able to give you some great insight. You can go, like I said, go on Facebook, have a look on people's social profiles. LinkedIn is a big one, especially if we're talking about professionals. See what makes them tick. You can find out on Instagram where they went on holiday last year. That's something you might want to be able to find out. You can go and do a bit of research on Google if they own a company or they're potentially a director of a company, or go on the charity commission if they're potentially a trustee of an organization, and you can go in there and you can find out their postcode. You can have a look at their house. Do they have a swimming pool? Careful, don't go too far down the research, but make sure you keep it ethical. And the best way you can keep it ethical is don't listen to gossip. Just go with things that you've actually seen from yourself or come from extremely reliable sources. But as it builds up over time, that person will become your best source of insight as to who they are. So let's just have a quick recap. So we've got these major donors. They're not necessarily millionaires, though they can be. They're probably professionals. We'll see you again soon, Amber. We are wanting to engage them on a one-to-one basis with our charity, because they're going to make big gifts to us. I haven't mentioned as well the fact that they can unlock lots of potential doors and offer a lot more than just money to your charity, but we haven't got time for that today or to go into any detail either. And what we're wanting to do is we're most likely to find these people first of all from the people who are closest into our organizations. That's where we're going to look first. That's where we're going to get our easier wins, because it's all about that relationship piece. And with these people, the relationships aren't starting from scratch. They're already building it up, or they've already been built up, and we're just kind of jumping on that horse, on that bandwagon as well. But we do need to employ a bit of strategy here. We haven't got time, unfortunately, to go into detail about how you can build relationships, but I just want to talk about a few practicalities really of incorporating major donor fundraising into your existing fundraising calendar, really. So what I want to do is press the fast forward button from the last chapter, maybe. We are going to just assume that we've picked a person that we want to build the relationship with. And we actually know a reasonable amount about this person. We're never going to feel we know enough, but we know enough to get us going. So what we want to do is think about an engagement plan. How are we going to engage with this person? How are we going to start talking to them, start building up that relationship? So the first thing we need to define is, right, who is it who's going to do the talking for us? Who's going to be that charity representative character? Is it your CEO? Is it the chair of the board? Is it somebody else who's more appropriate? There are no rules with that. It's just that guideline of how it usually works. We do need to consider, that whole kind of peer-to-peer and that kind of honor thing with, job titles and status. But we also need to consider personalities. We're not necessarily trying to make best friends here, but you want to be looking at matching personalities. If your potential donor is a mild-mannered, maybe reserved, quiet person, and your chair of your board is loud and overbearing and quite controlling, they're not the best person to be talking to that donor, because there's a mismatch of personalities. So see what you can work with in there. Also have the ideas we've got here of common ground, things that they might, if they both went to the same school, they're likely to remember the same people. That could be a major part of common ground on which to build that relationship. If they play both play golf or, that kind of thing. Support the same football team, enjoy reading the same books, looking for that overlap. That can help the person as well. And we've got, of course, their availability to invest in this relationship with the potential donor. And we've already said about the status as well. You might not have the luxury of thinking too hard about who, because you're small and it might just fall on your shoulders. That's okay. I'm sure you can still make a go of it. But in the best case scenario, you want to be including others in this major donor efforts as well. So step one, your engagement plan. Step one is who's going to be involved. Step two in your engagement plan is, right, what are we doing? But not what are we doing over the next couple of weeks. We're thinking quite often long term here. If it's it's kind of considered best practice, he says loosely, that you shouldn't really expect to be asking for a gift from a major donor until over a year after you've been chatting away to them. Some circumstances is different and you can ask sooner. And hopefully that is the case for you when you're starting off in this. But you need to be prepared to put in a lot of effort. So what you can do is you have to start being a bit canny with your thinking and thinking, right, I haven't got the time to do this as a completely separate effort. So have a think about what are you doing at the moment that you could maybe shoehorn a bit of major donor work into. So I was talking to a charity this morning who's just launched their annual toy drive. In fact, well, they launched it a couple of weeks ago. So they do a big thing in their town, and people donate toys, and then those toys are given to families around the county who can't really afford Christmas. Lovely thing to do, very standard charity thing to do as well. And they're using that as an engagement event for some major donors because they've got a couple of people, a business owner and a solicitor, who are on the periphery of the charity, but they're at the top of the prospect list for seeing if they can build major donor relationships with. One of them owns McDonald's. That's what they do. They're a franchisor for McDonald's. And so what they're doing is with that toy drive, the culmination of that is in a church hall where social workers, carers, and family members come along and gather toys to take and give to the children that need them. And so we were saying this morning, well, that's a perfect engagement event to invite these potential major donors down to come and see and actually put on a pair of jeans and be handing out toys to folks, because there's nobody who doesn't like giving toys to children, apart from maybe Scrooge. That's a kind of event that was going to be happening anyway, and they're just embracing the major donors and including the major donors in it. You might have another event going on. Maybe you've got a tour of your facility. Maybe you've got something else that's happening in your calendar that we can use as a cultivation event. So they've maybe been down and they've seen what's happened, but you want to emphasize that. Maybe bring them down and show them again. Maybe show them something different. Maybe invite them to some. You've got these engagement events where you kind of start off these relationships, you start off the conversation. You've got these cultivation events that you can use to act as like a boost to these relationships. But then you've got these windows you see down the bottom. And those windows are where you'd maybe pick up the phone and give them a ring and have a chinwag with them, go out for lunch, which they usually pay for, which is quite handy. And get to know them more, share a bit more about what excites you personally about the charity, so they can see your kind of belief in what happens shining through your eyes, rather than just reading these words that are maybe slightly dull off of a page. And we can do that. You don't have to do it very much. Maybe once every 6 months might be enough. But you can do, and then you move through to eventually you get to the point where you get to make an ask. Everything you do before that point that you ask, that's relationship building. That's your main focus. Making and helping, not making, helping that potential major donor fall in love with the results that you can achieve, inspiring them with the results that they can achieve should they make a gift. And then you ask, and actually, regardless of the answer, if they say yes or if they say no, what happens after that is called stewardship. And that's where you start maintaining that relationship. If you ask, they say yes, and then you just let it drop, sorry, they just feel like they've been left at the altar. They feel a wee bit jilted. And of course they do. They've given you this big gift and now you've just disappeared off to the horizon. If you make an ask, they say no, and you just don't contact them anymore, that leaves a hollow feeling as well inside them. Oh, I could have still helped in some other way, just not in that way. I would like to help. I really like what they're doing. I just couldn't do it. But when you put in stewardship, retention, maintaining the relationship, that's when potentially you move to a point where you can ask again and they say yes again. Or you ask again and this time they do say yes instead of saying no. Or maybe even you don't ask and they come to you and say, I can now give a gift of that size. Are you still interested? In which case you try not to jump up and down. So everything up to that point of the ask is relationship building, getting to know them, inspiring them. Everything after is about maintaining the relationship, maintaining the work that you've gone in. If you don't do that, it's a waste of time. All of that effort you've put in is just going to fall to the side, and nobody wants that. So that's bringing us towards the session end of the very brief introduction to major donors on this Lunchinar session. So we started off by defining major donor, didn't we? Somebody who makes a significant gift, and what that term significant means changes from charity to charity, from organization to organization. The people who are going to give to us, where do we go and find them? They're not not likely to be strangers. Chasing strangers is possible. It's going to take a heck of a long time. So you're probably going to know them already, or somebody you know is going to know them already. And it's all about that idea of building up relationship. And if we're going to start that strongly, we need to know about them. We need to know, first of all, if it's actually worth pursuing them because, well, we've got a good idea that they could provide a major donor level gift. But then we want to know as much as we can that's going to help us build that relationship, find that common ground, bring them in as part of the team, make them feel valued. Actually, it's what we're trying to do. And we're finding that out. And then we need a bit of strategy on it because you folks are shuffling and juggling so many different responsibilities. And major donors is a really wonderful form of fundraising because it's really flexible. Really flexible. They're genuinely, because it's so relationship led, there's no hard and fast rules necessarily here, which means you can bend it around your other responsibilities, but don't ignore it because these relationships can go cold. If you haven't talked to somebody in a year and a half, 2 years, picking up the phone and talking to them, well, nobody likes it when a friend gets in touch with you only because they want something, eh? That's not what we want with our major donors. And if we do all of that, we can turn it into a decent income stream for us. It's a really wonderful replacement or supplement to trust income because we're talking similar size gifts quite often. And it's something that I encourage all charities to explore with the knowledge that it's not suitable for everyone. Grant.